Imagine sitting at your dinner table, surrounded by your closest friends. Outside, the sun is setting over the marble peaks of Rome. The air is thick with the scent of wine and roasted olives. Suddenly, the evening is shattered by the sharp, rhythmic clatter of iron-shod sandals. A unit of Praetorian guards has surrounded your home. This isn't a routine check. The officer doesn't carry a scroll with a court summons. He carries a verbal order from your former pupil, the most powerful man on the planet, Emperor Nero. The order is simple. You must die tonight, by your own hand. Your wife collapses in hysterics. Your friends begin to sob, realizing their utter impotence against the will of a tyrant. The centurions have already unsheathed their blades, ready to finish the job if you hesitate. In this moment, 99% of people on Earth turn into terrified animals. They beg, they crawl, they scream at the heavens or try to run. But you are Lucius Annaeus Seneca. You slowly stand up, gesture for silence, and look death in the eye with such tranquility that it's as if they simply brought you the bill for dinner. Tonight, Rome will learn that you can take a philosopher's life, but you can never take his freedom. Today, we break down Seneca's logic, a system of mental armor that allows a person to remain undefeated even when the entire world has turned against them. This is the story of how to turn an execution into a final triumph. To understand how Seneca reached this moment, we must understand the hell he lived in for the last 15 years. Seneca was not a beggar like Diogenes. On the contrary, he was the wealthiest man in the empire. He was the chief advisor to Nero, a youth who started as the hope of Rome and ended as a bloodthirsty psychopath. For years, Seneca walked a razor's edge. He tried to restrain Nero's madness with logic and morality. But how do you teach compassion to a man who murdered his own mother? Seneca watched his friends disappear one by one as Rome descended into a state of terror. He lived in a state of absolute pressure where every word could be his last. In Stoicism, there is a vital concept, the inner citadel. Seneca realized he lived in a golden cage. He had villas, gardens, and millions of sesterces, but he knew they didn't belong to him. They belonged to fortune, and fortune could reclaim them at any second. For most of us, losing a job or a status is a catastrophe. For Seneca, it was merely a matter of time. He developed a psychological strategy we now call premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Every morning, he imagined the worst. He didn't just think about death, he lived it in his mind. He visualized the confiscation of his property, exile, and execution. Why? To strip fear of its greatest weapon, surprise. Fear feeds on the unknown. But if you have already died 1,000 times in your thoughts, the real thing becomes nothing more than an old acquaintance. In 65 AD, Nero, having completely lost touch with reality, accused Seneca of participating in the Pisonian conspiracy. There was no evidence, but evidence was unnecessary. Nero simply needed to remove the man whose moral authority served as a constant reminder of his own depravity. When the Praetorian tribune burst into Seneca's house, he expected to find a broken old man. Instead, he faced what psychologists call radical acceptance. Seneca wasn't even surprised. He calmly asked for permission to revise his will. When the officer refused, Seneca turned to his weeping friends and said the line that became a Stoic anthem. "Since I am not allowed to reward you as you deserve, I leave you the only thing I have left, and the best thing I have, the pattern of my life." In that moment, the power dynamic completely flipped. The Praetorians were armed to the teeth, but they felt small. They were slaves to the orders of a cowardly tyrant, while Seneca was a master of his own reason. When his friends broke down in tears, Seneca rebuked them with a piercing question. "Where is your philosophy now? Where are the years of training against the blows of fate?" He reminded them that philosophy isn't reading books in a quiet study. It is training for a fight. It is the ability to maintain your composure when the stage is collapsing. Seneca proved that if you fear death, you are already dead. You are a slave to circumstances. But if you accept your mortality, you are absolutely free. That night, only one man was dying, but the rest of Rome was in chains, except for Seneca. Seneca's execution became one of the longest and most agonizing scenes in antiquity. But it wasn't a defeat, It was his final lecture. Because he was an old man who lived an ascetic life, his blood flowed slowly after he opened his veins. He didn't thrash in agony. Instead, he summoned his secretaries and began to dictate his final thoughts. Imagine, your life force is draining away, you are bleeding out, yet you continue to work on what matters. You continue to be a teacher. Why? To prove to Nero, you can stop my heart, you can destroy my flesh, but you cannot make my mind flinch. You are the emperor of the world, but you are not the master of my will. Seneca eventually entered a pool of hot water to speed up the process. He scooped up some of the water, sprinkled it on his slaves, and said it was a libation to Jupiter, the deliverer. This was a sacred act. Even in his final minutes, he maintained structure, ritual, and meaning. This is Seneca's logic in action. First, dichotomy of control. You don't control the emperor's order, but you control 100% of your reaction to it. Second, loyalty to principles. Your values only have a price when you are willing to pay for them. Seneca wrote about courage his whole life. Now he demonstrated it. Third, absence of need. Seneca proved that a human doesn't need tomorrow to be happy. He was satisfied with how he lived his final hour. Today we aren't greeted by centurions. Our Neros look different. It might be a boss threatening to fire you. It might be a toxic society demanding you conform. It might be a sudden crisis that ruins years of planning. We are all under pressure, and our automatic behavior is a fear response. We try to negotiate with fate. We complain about unfairness. But Seneca's logic teaches us that the world's unfairness is a constant. The only variable is your ability to prevent the world from breaking your inner core. When stress weighs on you, ask yourself, what is currently in Nero's power and what is in Seneca's? Nero, the external world, controls your salary, your comfort, and your physical time. But Seneca, your mind, controls your judgment. If you accept the worst in advance, you become untouchable. You cannot intimidate a person who has already made peace with loss. This is the ultimate form of power. Nero, surrounded by armies, suffered from paranoia and terror. Seneca, dying in a bath, was in absolute peace. Nero survived his teacher by only 3 years. He ended his life in disgrace, alone, begging his slaves to kill him because he was too cowardly to do it himself. He died a slave to his passions and his fear. Seneca, however, remained in history not as a victim of the regime, but as a symbol of the triumph of the human spirit. His letters and essays became the blueprints for kings, slaves, and soldiers for 2,000 years. Seneca's ultimate lesson is not a call to suicide. It is a call to mental autonomy. Your tomorrow is not guaranteed. Your success can vanish in the blink of an eye. Your loved ones may leave. The only thing that stays with you until your last breath is how you meet the blows of fate. Look at your life. Where are you showing weakness where you need resilience? What did you trade your freedom for? Comfort, the approval of the crowd, the fear of change? It is time to apply the Seneca move. Stop hoping for luck. Start training your readiness for misfortune. Because only the one who is ready to lose everything truly owns themselves. Your inner citadel must be impregnable. And when the world knocks on your door with bad news, you should be able to simply smile and say, I've been expecting you. Come in. Mastery of life is not the ability to avoid the storm. It is the ability to remain clear-headed while your ship is going down. Be like Seneca. Be unconquerable.